on and your journeys here weren't too difficult. So this evening we're here with TikTok's voice of change, Benjy Kusi, for an evening of positivity and specifically to talk about his book, Hope This Helps. The world can often feel like a very scary, complicated and messy place, and it's not always clear what the correct thing to say, the best thing to do, or the right way to be. Hope This Helps gives guidance on things that can appear incredibly difficult to navigate. Centering tolerance, kindness, and empathy, the book takes us back to our roots as a human race of simply wanting to connect, be heard, and enjoy life. More than anything, this book reminds you that not everyone can be everything all of the time, but the little things each of us can do to make the world slightly better can amount to something incredible. So Benjy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My first question to you is, how did you get into writing?
Hi, Benjy here. Firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of this festival, and especially in the first year of my book being out. So it's such an honor. So thank you so much for inviting me, and for everyone who has joined. So how did I get into writing this book that I have here, and in general? So I loved reading growing up, loved reading growing up. My parents were very, very strict, Catholic, Ghanaian by ethnicity. And so I think like a lot of kids in my position, like, where I wasn't necessarily allowed out with my friends as much. And they had a very kind of one-way view of the world. And so I was kind of itching to like kind of discover more and learn more. And so I read a lot. So I read a ton as a kid and into my teens. And then I did an English literature degree, English and philosophy at Sussex University. And there my love for kind of literature kind of grew. But I didn't really see myself as a writer, really. I just loved books. And I think where the writing kind of came in was actually in the workplace. So I worked in advertising. I had a few stops along the way, but my kind of main kind of 9-to-5 career was in advertising. I was a strategist, and something that I really loved was presenting. So we'd meet clients and I would like present the strategy for the year, for example, and I would stand on stage and I present this whole deck and everyone would applaud and it'd be lovely, it'd be great. And they'd give us lots of money. And I loved doing that. And I loved kind of like curating those presentations. And to do that, you need to be able to write, right? And to kind of really be able to take something that maybe is very complicated and present it in a way that's accessible and also engaging and interesting. And it was kind of through that kind of I realized actually like I do have a talent for that, I have a skill for that. And that's what then fed into my kind of TikTok career, which I'm sure we'll get onto. And so then when it came down to kind of this book, I already kind of had an idea of how I wanted it to look, how I wanted it to feel, how I wanted it to sound. And it kind of just came out just very, very naturally. So I think like it's my love of reading that equipped me to kind of be able to have developed kind of the know-how and the skill set that I kind of leverage to create and produce. And so here we are.
Brilliant. And so you mentioned your TikTok, which I know we're going to talk about later, but I'll pull that up because I thought it was really, really interesting that you've built a really incredible following. And the content that you put out is like very educational. So my question is how you translated kind of the advertising pitch deck presenting into this kind of short form TikTok content, because that's two very different things, but you've done both successfully. So where did you kind of see those challenges?
So I actually would challenge you on that and say that there's so many kind of similarities, and it goes back to like my degree and studying English and also philosophy. There's so many tie-ins there. Ultimately, I think what it comes down to is so my TikToks are basically, for those of you who don't know my TikToks, they are educational, like short clips, where I basically explain an issue, or I kind of provide like tips on a topic or an issue, or I share my thoughts on something. And it's all kind of tends to be around inclusion and well-being. So I talk a lot about anti-racism. I talk a lot about issues relating to the LGBTQIA+ community, especially right now, Happy Pride Month. And so that's my content. But what I'm doing in all of those videos is I'm picking something which is like something that I think is important for people to know more about or to understand better. And I'm unpacking it in a way that is accessible and that is engaging and ultimately will drive people to then act after they see my video. So I act in a way that maybe they're now informed, so they're going to go in like, I don't know, like do better in some way, like maybe be a better ally to somebody, or be kinder to somebody else, or donate here, or like inform, you know, someone they meet who maybe doesn't know enough about the issue that they now know more about. So that's kind of my aim with the content. And going back to my days in advertising, it was very much about taking something that was very complicated, so maybe like a marketing strategy for like a luxury fashion brand, and, you know, and unpacking kind of where we were going to spend our money and then what the outcome was going to be in terms of like clicks, impressions, revenue, and explaining it in a way that wasn't boring and that was attractive, and drove them to act, right? So the action desired was for them to be like, this sounds great, give us your money, right? So that it was the same kind of principle. And even going back to my degree, when you're writing an essay, what you're doing is you're taking a kind of a complex kind of topic or an issue or theory, and you're breaking it down in your own words in order to convince somebody, right? And you want them to act as well. The way you want them to act is you want them to be like, oh, that was great. Like, I understood exactly what you meant. You deserve the A. So like, these are all kind of like transferable skills, which I kind of developed from a young age that I've been able to kind of like leverage throughout my kind of career until this day.
No, you're completely right. You've changed my mind.
Well, there we go. See, like, that's the skill right there, you know, like, and I think it's really important in general. I was at a networking kind of seminar the other day, where I was invited to speak, and they said, you know, what do you think the key to success is in general in your career, which is like a huge question. But my answer, when I thought about it for a second, it was, you need to figure out what your mission is. So what do you care about? What matters to you? What do you want to achieve in this life, right? And then you need to think about where you add value as a person. So for me, I think I've identified that I am somebody who is able to, you know, explain and persuade and motivate, right? That's something that I can do very well. For other people, it may be, I don't know, like baking really well, you know, that's why they add value. Or some people it's like coding because they're really good with numbers. And I think it's like, once you align your mission in life with your skill set where you can add value, like, you'll fly. That, I think that's when at the intersection of those two things is like success and satisfaction.
Yeah, 100%. What do you think spurred you to create this TikTok account? Because I appreciate that you had the following, you had the content, and then the book came. So I know that they sort of flowed into one, but where did the kind of idea for, do you know what, I feel really passionately about this and now I want to start a TikTok account?
So my TikTok account, so basically, back to my advertising days, while I was working at a big London agency, and while I was there, I was encountering lots of issues that were relating to my identity. So the fact that, you know, my racial identity being Black, and also my sexual orientation as well. And so just stuff like microaggressions, overt bigotry from people within my organization, from clients. I was also realizing that as an industry, as an agency, and as an industry, it just wasn't very diverse, wasn't very accessible either. And it catered to a certain type of person, especially when it came to career progression and things like that. And I've always been somebody who hasn't been able to kind of spot something that's wrong and just like sit there. So I had to do something about it. So I started an employee resource group, basically, which is a group of people who were marginalized in some way. And we came together and we spoke about how we were going to lobby those in power for, like, in order to achieve change. So I did that from 2018, actually. And we did a decent job, but progress was slow. It was slow, but we kind of didn't really see. It's funny, like in hindsight, we didn't really achieve that much. The powers that be they were doing their best, but they weren't really as galvanized behind what we were trying to do until 2020 happened. And the George Floyd was murdered, and the BLM resurged in popularity and significance, and suddenly there was such a spotlight shone on the work that we were doing, that we were already doing, and a lot of the projects that we were working on were suddenly accelerated, and suddenly there was budget to do lots of things, and a lot of change was happening really fast. And instead of that encouraging me, it kind of demotivated me. I've got to be honest, because I realized that actually I was not in any sort of position of power to really affect change. I was at the mercy of the powers that be. And when they decide that it matters, then cool, great, progress. And when they get bored, or their priorities change, or it's where they switch up, then progress halts, right? And you're seeing already now, like we're only in 2023, and there are so many organizations and individuals in power that came out 3 years ago to be like, we care about this, we want to change things, that haven't actually followed through on their actions. Anyway, so I left my job. I was like, I think I need to be in a position of power. So how do you do that? So the people in an organization who have the power to change things when it comes to making it more inclusive are people in HR typically. So I went to do a HR MSc, and the idea was that I was going to actually return to my agency. So I had quite a few contacts in HR, and they said that they would love to offer me a job in HR when I came back with that qualification. So that's kind of what I did. I studied the HR MSc, and while I was doing that, so I've always kind of been, like I said, I can't see something that's like wrong and not say something. So I've always been very active, kind of just on social media, like just talking, sharing my opinion and stuff like that. But it was always on Instagram, just like on my stories to my friends. And basically my sister is a content creator. She makes travel content. And she was already quite popular on Instagram. And then she started on TikTok. Maybe in 2020, and said that actually there's a really great community on there of people who actually really care about the stuff that you're talking about. And I think a lot of stuff you're saying on Instagram would work really well on TikTok. Then there's an audience for it. And I think that people would actually find your content, or what you have to say, quite helpful. And then also that would maybe help you make beneficial connections, because you're on this mission to kind of make organizations like your own kind of more inclusive, more accessible. So it may help you to kind of get more exposure. So I was like, okay, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, like I thought TikTok was for dancing. I can't lie. And I thought I was too old for TikTok. Mind you, back then I was 26. And I was like, I'm too old for TikTok. That's for kids. But I literally took a video that I posted on my Instagram to my TikTok. I was like, oh, we'll see, whatever. And it did really well. And then I just did another one. That did really well. And I was like, okay. And then I just kind of just kept going. And now it's been 2.5 years.
Yeah, and you're on the up and up. You're just growing and getting that reach, and you've got an amazing book deal out of it. We do have a brilliant question in the chat, but I just have one more on the sort of TikTok angle. So obviously you've been doing it for 2.5 years. I'm sure you would have got a wealth of feedback during that time, both positive and negative. How do you think the feedback from the general public impacted the book that you've written? Do you kind of think that you came in and said, have my ideas and this is what I'm putting down? Was it a very organic process that you were almost sounding out themes on your TikTok, getting that feedback and putting that into the book? Sort of how did that all work?
So the book was very much born from my TikTok content, essentially. It very much was, I think it's really important to be transparent I think it is anyway. I always endeavor to be very transparent when it comes to like the book, how I got the deal, as much as I can be anyway, without sharing all my secrets. But because it's so hard to publish. It's so tough. And there were so many amazing kind of writers who have books that are amazing that are just, aren't going to see the light of day when it comes to like mainstream, publishing, because it's just so hard, right? And so, I like to be very transparent about how I got this opportunity, because I wouldn't want it to perceive, to kind of misrepresent the situation for something that it's not. So basically what happened is that I basically like soft pitched my I'm always pitching, to be fair. Whoever I meet, I'm always like, yeah, so I'm Benjy and I would love to do this. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that. Like, and I'm going to do it at some point. So the book, so I'd always kind of thought that my content would work really well in another format. I thought it would, so people always tell me that they show my videos to their parents who don't have TikTok, or their grandparents who don't have TikTok. I also, people tell me that they play my videos in their workplace, in company meetings and things like that, or in schools. And so I've always thought that it would actually work really well as a book if I got like some of the key principles of my content, and I put it into book form. It'd mean that it would reach a wider audience. That's always something that I've always thought. And I've also thought it worked great maybe as like a video, like TV moment, you know, something like that. So
little BBC Three soundbite type thing.
Right. You see.
I see the vision.
Very that. And so basically I kind of was just like nattering away about the book to people. And then basically I managed to talk to somebody who actually was friends with a commissioning editor. And she basically told her about the book. And then she was really excited about it. And that's how I got the first meeting. And when I had the meeting, they were like, you know, the TikTok idea sounds great. Do you have an idea of what videos you would want to to include in the book or feature in the book? What themes do you want to include? And I was like, yeah, like these are the videos I think would work great as chapters. And so they then provided feedback. And then we kind of went back and forth. And then we kind of decided on the chapters, which were basically just videos that I'd already done. And then I expanded them into 4 chapters. And that's how that went.
Oh, brilliant. So I'll move over to chat. So we've got, do you think that your location matters, sort of city versus town, in terms of diversity and enthusiasm from your audience?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. And I think short answer, yes. Short answer, yes. Long answer, I think I hate to generalize. It goes against something I stand for, but I think you know, there is a general trend that people who live in more cosmopolitan areas, who do live in kind of more major cities, do maybe have a greater awareness when it comes to, you know, diversity. There being a diverse, you know, spectrum of people that live and exist on this planet, and also the importance of including them. And the need for that, and the certain issues that communities face, you know, when it comes to stuff like you know, Pride Month. You may, if you live in somewhere like London, your neighbor might be a gay couple, and you may actually see them every day. And so therefore, when we're talking about issues regarding, you know, gay people, you kind of have a human reference, right? Whilst I definitely have positive and negative kind of feedback from people who live in other areas of the country, who tell me, who kind of dismiss what I'm saying, who go, oh, that's not an issue. That's not, you're making that up. Or that's not really like a big enough deal for us to be worrying about right now, you know, or and I think what you're really saying is that I don't see it, or I don't experience it, and so therefore I don't care about it because it doesn't matter to my day to day, you know. I think we see it a lot with like trans issues. There are many studies that have been done which are basically trying to connect the idea of like transphobia or just like ignorance around trans identities to awareness of trans people in like a real sense, right? In a tangible sense. So i.e., a lot of people who are, and this is what people are trying to look into, and I think there's a truth there. I think a lot of people who are very much like misunderstanding of what it means to be trans, or even against or turned off by the idea of people being trans, actually don't know anyone who is trans, or don't even have trans people in their vicinity or in their environment. And that's not an excuse or justification, but I think I'm basically identifying the fact that ultimately it is kind of largely true that if you are not immersed in you know, an area that is diverse, you may have less of an awareness of, you know, the issues that people who come from underrepresented backgrounds face. And so therefore you may kind of not understand the importance of them as a general trend. But what I would also say is that I get messages a lot, and I have people who love what I do, who do live in areas that, you know, in small towns and villages and places where there isn't much diversity. And it galvanizes them. They're like, you know, we don't have an awareness of these issues in our space and our area, but we know it's important. So, you know, how do we communicate the value of inclusion? Like, how can we talk about it more? How can we help as a community that maybe doesn't have many people like you of that, you know, background or identity amongst us? So I don't want to generalize, but I think there is like a general trend that you can kind of unpick, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that different geographical areas have different ignorances, for sure.
Yes. Oh yeah, 100%. You know, when it comes to like racism, you know, racism, not every single person of color experiences the same type of racism. And so you have many parts of the country where there's a large South Asian population. And so the issues in regards to race there are very different to like maybe parts of the country where there's a large like Black population. So there are so many kind of nuance, and you're so right in terms of like the different ignorances. It does kind of depend a lot as well on geographical location, even stuff like accents. That's something that I noticed down, you know, in London, or just down south in general. There is a lot of like accent bias, a lot of generalizations when it comes to people who have accents that come from like regions in the north. There's also stereotypes around, you know, the how intellectual such individuals are, or you know, the general kind of social attitudes of people who have certain accents or their capabilities. And so yeah, I think like regionality is really important and key to consider, for sure.
Definitely. And I think there's also something to be said, which I think is what your social media and by proxy book does so brilliantly, is sort of it's really important to educate people in a it's not non-confrontational, but it's non-judgmental. It's not like, you know, you're not assuming that somebody's intentions are negative when you're providing them with the information to make them be less ignorant, basically. And I think that I find it really admirable and interesting how you managed to take very controversial topics that many people would feel really frustrated by, and you've gone, okay, well, let's just take the emotion out of it. This is the fact, and this is a really kind way to kind of deal with that. Do you think that you've always felt like that? You've always gone for like a kind of, you know, let's just educate people, or do you feel like that's something that's developed through your career?
I think it's a disposition thing. I do think it is. I'm definitely, whilst I do believe that, I believe the most productive way to inform people is to not assume knowledge, and also not assume that people are being willfully ignorant. So if you're ignorant, you don't know something, right? That's to me, it doesn't make you a bad person, right? It's when you're willfully ignorant, i.e. you have access to all the information you could ever need about a topic or an issue, and you still decide to do something that is harmful or think in a harmful way. Like, that's different to if you just don't know something. So I genuinely believe that's the most productive way to go about things. But I think it actually just goes back to who I am as a person. I'm someone who I don't really like drama or conflict. I grew up in a house with 3 other siblings. So there was always some sort of drama. There's always some sort of issue. And I've always kind of just like shied away from that. I think in school as well, I went to a very white school, and I was very Black, of course, and also very gay and camp. And so, you know, I face a lot of hardships at school. And so I've always just really appreciated just peace. Peace. And so I'm not really like a confrontational person. And so therefore I'm always trying to really just engage with people in good faith first, in the hopes that we can come to a resolution, like without conflict. What I would say though, and this is something that some people have said to me before about my content and my approach in general when it comes to educating around inclusion, is that they feel that I'm maybe prioritizing being palatable. So i.e. the fact that I express myself in a way that is kind of maybe I'm like smiley, I'm like, hi, Benji here, let's talk about this issue, or, and I'm not necessarily like shouting or swearing, or like, I'm not maybe getting overly emotional about things. I don't really get emotional that much online. I do that in my own time. And I think for some people who are very passionate about these issues because they care about them and they're very angry and they're very loud, and I think I've definitely had feedback from people who are kind of maybe more like that, to be like, it's unfair that people like you are often listened to more because you're more palatable, or you're less like threatening. Do you know what I mean? And that's something that I'm very aware of, I think. And I tell people all the time who say stuff like, oh, Benji, like, I love what you do because you're so, you're not too much, you're very eloquent, unlike some other people. And I'm like, no, that's just me. Like, I show up like this because I'm authentically like this, right? But at the same time, like, justified anger is a real thing. Like, the issues that I'm talking about, if people are getting angry about them, rightfully so, because I think it's justified to be angry in the face of injustice, right? And I think that I really try and challenge people who tone police, who say that people who are really like passionate and loud and maybe aren't caring about social cues because they just want to get their point across, people who dismiss that. I'm like, no, let's try our best to listen and with compassion, because ultimately, if people are really passionate about an issue to the point where they're getting emotional, it's because there's something that maybe we should be listening to, or people should pay more attention to. So I think, like, yeah, as much as I show up as myself because I feel like it's important to be authentic to me and who I am, I don't do it because I think it's like the way that we should all be. It's just the way I kind of just genuinely am.
Yeah, and I think that everybody's totally valid to their reaction. You need the more impassioned people, and you need the sort of more, laid back, here at the facts people, because people react to information very differently, and one is not more important than the other at all. So I'm just gonna veer back to the book. So I know that you took a lot of your TikTok content and kind of molded it into the book. What would you say was sort of the most challenging part? Because I'm assuming this is like the first like long form piece of content that you've written. Did you sort of seek advice from anywhere? Was it something that you just kind of had to sit down and bang it out until you were happy with it?
Yeah, I'm lucky and blessed enough to have a few friends who have published books, and which was really, really helpful just from a general advice perspective, in terms of like from like about publishing and just the process, but also like tips on kind of how best to approach writing it. I think one thing that I did kind of really struggle with is just like logistically, like, and this is a short book, right? This is not a big book. Like, I'm sure we've all read books that are way bigger than this. But it's a lot of words, a lot of chapters. And thinking about producing something that is coherent and makes sense. And now, mind you, every chapter is kind of separate. So it's like, I even made it a bit easier for myself. But you do start thinking about it as a whole work. And so to think in depth about a chapter or even a theme or a paragraph, and then zoom out and make sure that it makes sense in the context of the entire book, it's a challenge. And I have friends who write fiction, and I'm like, how? Like, and it's really like writing. I've always had an appreciation for the art of writing. And like, but I think now, having produced the book, I'm even more in awe of people who are able to write really complex weaving novels, because like it's a huge like ordeal and task to make sure that the overarching narrative makes sense, whilst you're still kind of getting into nitty-gritty and making sure that the little moments in between also, are there and make sense and are appealing and engaging. So yeah, that was probably the thing that I found most challenging. I think also as well, knowing how much of myself to put in the book was also kind of a challenge for me. because I don't really, on my TikToks, I don't really necessarily share as much about me on my TikToks. I do on like live streams and things like that. So I do those every week, and that's really fun. To show like a personal side. But I don't really. It's educational content. It's informative. If I share anything about myself, it may be like a feeling I'm having or an experience that I like to share, but I don't really share a lot about my life. And so when I was writing this book, I was like, I have more of an opportunity to do that and to really kind of explain why I care so much about these issues that I'm talking about in the book, and to really get my perspective across, and to weave who I am, into the book. But I found that kind of challenging, so I'm not really used to doing that. And there were lots of things which I wrote and like submitted and was like, wait, no, recall, let's cut that out. I'm not ready to share that with the world. And even bits now when I reread, I'm like, oh, I said that. Oh, but it's fine. Like it's fine. Like it has to be done. And I think, that's the point of like producing a piece of work. It's meant to be, it's you, but sharing your perspective and your viewpoint. And I think when it comes to long form, that's an opportunity to really show more of yourself and show up as yourself authentically. And so I try my best to do that, but I found it quite hard.
Do you think if there were a second book that you would kind of add more vulnerability, or do you think you would step back and kind of go more like, I don't know, like facts and education? How did you kind of find that? I know you said you found it difficult, but would you go, actually, yeah, let's do it again, here's my life story?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'm not old enough for the life story yet. Okay, there's many.
You sound very impressive. I could definitely read a book in your life thus far.
Thank you. I think I would share more. I think I would. I think I shared enough, for this book. And I'm very proud of it. I think if I was to do another one on similar themes, I'd maybe share some more lived experiences. I think lived experiences really have the power to like humanize an issue or a topic. When you're talking about for example, like microaggressions, so things that people may say that are subtle, forms of discrimination. People may understand what that is as like an issue and a harmful thing, but as soon as you take the story and you go, well, because I had somebody, do this to me one time, or someone said this to me one time, and this is how I felt about it, and this is how it impacted me. Like suddenly it becomes more tangible, it becomes more real, and I think it kind of inspires people more from like here, right, from like an emotional place. And so that's really powerful. Like sharing testimonies are really powerful, and I think like I would definitely maybe do a bit more of that if I was to do like another book. But in this book already, like there are examples that I do share of like personal things that I have gone through. And I'm proud of what the things I did decide to divulge in this book.
Yeah. And I guess because you are online and have that following, there is that sort of parasocial relationship. So when you do share those anecdotes of things that have happened to you, it affects people in the way that it would affect if like their friend was telling them. So that must feel like quite a big responsibility to make sure that you're telling your story in the way that you want to be heard by all those people.
Yes, 100%. I think like I'm somebody who it's very strange because I love talking. I love like presenting and posting my little TikToks, and I love it so much, but I actually hate being perceived, which makes no sense. I think it's because I have lots of thoughts and opinions, and I think I have a right to have them heard. But then the thought of somebody else taking in those thoughts and opinions and then making a judgment or having an opinion on my opinion, I'm like, oh, wait, let's not do that.
Let me just put this in the void.
Yeah. I just want to be speaking kind of into the void. So I think like that can be really tough online. Kind of, like showing up in a way where you know that people are always going to be judging what you're saying and like kind of and having an opinion on what you're saying. And I think it can be hard to like break out of being self-conscious, because you need to lose that in order to kind of just be authentically yourself and people connect to authenticity. One thing I would also say though is that my lived experience is something which I will only share if it has value and it has purpose. And I think, like, as marginalized people, if you're a marginalized person, whether by race, gender, and sexual orientation, if you're somebody who faces discrimination, has discriminatory experiences, your life shouldn't be to the service of like educating others. Like, your life is yours, your stories are yours. I decide to share the stories that I choose to share if I feel like it will be helpful, if it has like a productive impact. But I'm very much against, you know, people feeling like they have to share everything that they're going through. It's Pride Month right now, and I every Pride Month, now that I'm visible, I get approaches from brands and organizations who want to work with me. And the way they want to work with me Pride Month is they want me to come and share my coming out story. They're like, you know, it's Pride Month and we'd like you to share your coming out story with us. And I always reply and I say, why? It's, you know, for me, it's a very sensitive story. I kind of touch on it in my book, but I don't go into any sort of real detail because it's like a sensitive, triggering kind of story for me. And I'm sure it's the same for a lot of queer people. And so if you're asking for me to share that, I need to know that, you know, there's going to be something that's going to make it worth it, right? And what I mean by that is not clicks and awareness and engagement for you. You know, it needs to be something that's going to help me or my community. Like, otherwise you're just exploiting my trauma. You know, and usually they either don't respond or they go, oh, I'm so sorry, you know. But it's like, I think people need to think about these things. Like, my traumatic experiences aren't just there for the taking. Like, and so I think I feel very empowered by being able to be like, I choose to share this because I have autonomy and I think it's going to be productive to share it. But the things that I don't think are productive to share, or I just don't want to share because I don't feel like it, I won't. And I feel very empowered to, you know, to do that. And I try and empower others as much as possible to also think about that as well. I think it's really important.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'm just looking at the time. So we've gabbed away. I just wanted to open the floor. If anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat and I can ask them. Or if you'd like to ask them yourself, you can just do a reaction and unmute yourself.
Oh, I think someone's unmuted.
Did you want to ask a question? Or is there an accidental unmute?
Hi, I'm Tasnim. Sorry, I was like, I was driving, that's why I just drove in. I think you're amazing the way you it's really interesting. But one thing that Essex Book Festival is this idea of location, because I lived in cities. I lived in London, I lived in New York, and I lived in Dubai. And then I came back to Colchester, which is an hour from London. Obviously, that's part of Essex. And it just feels like everything's so hard. It's so
Well, is it just me or is it?
No, Tasnim, I think we might have lost you if you can hear us. But as a fellow Colchesterian,
right, but here I feel visible, and that's quite interesting. How, like when you were saying about you communicating the way you are, it's very like your location and your audience is very important. Would you say?
So I missed a lot of that question, unfortunately, because you broke up for us. It cut off when you were talking about now you live in Colchester, everything's really hard, and it kind of cut there. So sincere apologies. Please, may you kind of repeat the second part of the question?
Well, in a busy city, it seems like people are already quite educated about things, cultural things or whatever. And then when you get to outside, you have to keep explaining to people. But it's quite tricky because it's almost like people are happy not knowing.
Mm.
You know, it's like, hello, you know, I don't really want to kind of, because they perhaps are not experiencing the same things that I have, because possibly a lot of people have just grown up here and it's been kind of gradual progression in life, whereas I've kind of lived in different countries and speak different languages. So it's interesting, this idea of how do you go forward?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that question and sharing your lived experience with us. I think what I would say is I'd go back to what I touched on earlier in the conversation about the difference between ignorance and willful ignorance. First of all, actually, before that, I would say that if someone is being ignorant towards you, you don't have a duty to educate that person. Just because I am a Black person who experiences racism does not mean I therefore have a duty to educate people who are racist towards me. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm the victim in a situation. I don't have to do anything, right? That's the first point. But however, I do understand that unfortunately we do exist in environments and where we unfortunately have to swallow it, the pain, and try our best to make the best, try our best to kind of make the most of the situation, by maybe trying to inform people about why what they've done or they said has hurt us. And what I would say is when you're doing that, you need to think about whether it's someone is truly ignorant or not. So are they ignorant in the sense that they don't know something? In which case, if you have the capacity to inform them, then I would say, like, go ahead and do that. But if you do that and they demonstrate in some way that they have taken what you said on board, but they don't care, or they don't care enough, or they're still kind of looking to invalidate what you're saying, that then goes into willful ignorance for me, i.e., you know exactly what you're doing, you know exactly why I am reacting in this way, and you're dismissing me, or you're dismissing the issue. And at that point, I then try my best to separate from such individuals, or in a work environment, that's when I go, well, this is not for me to kind of deal with. I'm going to try and use the proper channels, if there are any, to report or to flag this. I think it's really important that we don't kind of burn out, or we don't kind of further harm ourselves, right, by trying our best to educate people who aren't really looking to really become more informed. And I think there is very much a pleasure and an enjoyment, unfortunately, that some people get from kind of driving people to explain themselves. Oh, I get this. I get it a lot on TikTok. I'll say a video. I'll do a video about a topic. Someone will be like, will try and invalidate it by being like, oh, well, you haven't thought about this. And I'll say, oh, I have. If you go to the video, I kind of touch on that. And they go, oh, well, I don't think you did it properly. Can you explain again? I'm like, no. I did it. The video's there. Rewatch it, please. I'm not doing it. I'm not explaining myself again for you. Why do you think you deserve that? You don't.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Something brilliant my mum taught me is that no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
So you never have to say, no, I just, blah, 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 or no, I don't feel like, it's just that no, end all.
Yeah. So it's boundary setting, right? And I talk a lot about that in my book. It's really, really important that we set boundaries for ourselves, especially as people who are from marginalized backgrounds.
Thank you so much for your question, Tasnam. Next I've got is Debbie. So which platform do you think has had the biggest impact on getting your voice heard? And is that the same as the platform that you've enjoyed creating on the most?
That is such a great question. That's a really good question, actually. So biggest impact, it just has to be TikTok. I have the biggest audience there. I think TikTok has a huge reach also. It's really interesting. I will have videos which won't do huge numbers, they may only get a few thousand views, which is a lot of people still, but like, you know, it won't go viral, right? But then I will go somewhere, I'll travel to another city, or I'll be on a call and someone will be like, oh, I saw that video that you did about that topic. And actually that really helps me to have this conversation with somebody, or that we actually have implemented that strategy into, you know, our strategy for the year, or like, and all that really touched me, you know, and I'm like, oh, wow, like I didn't think, you know, it's really surprising how many people I'm able to reach through my TikTok videos. Not just in this country. I have people in like Melbourne who will email me being like, oh, we love what you said about this and we've used it to do that. And I'm like, this is wild. So TikTok, I think for reach, it's just undeniable. Like videos can just go everywhere, and which is so cool. The one you enjoy doing the most, I'm gonna cheat and actually say that it's not a platform. In terms of getting my voice heard, I love speaking. I love like human interaction and connection. Stuff like this, when I get invited to do like conferences and talks, and you know, when I work as a consultant, so I do a lot of like coaching, workshops, seminars, that sort of thing. And I love it. I think for me personally, it provides an opportunity to kind of have a greater impact, because you're able to kind of, you know, usually like you look at somebody and see how they're reacting to what you're saying. People are able to, it makes more of a conversation, you know, and again, it's that human element. I think online, unfortunately, a lot of people don't really see people online as like real people. You know, I get comments sometimes and I'll reply to them and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you were going to reply. Oh, thank you. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm a real person. I get notifications like you get notifications, like, you know, but I think in person, you can't deny that I'm a real human being. And I think I really enjoy the breakthroughs. So, you know, I'll be looking at someone sometimes across a boardroom table, and I'll be like, you don't believe in, I don't know, like systemic racism? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And I love that. And that's something which you can't really replicate through like social media. Thank you. That's a great question. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your question, Deborah. Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask? We've got 3 minutes left, so it's probably time for one more if anybody has one.
That went so fast. Oh
it went so fast.
Went so quickly.
It was 42. I was really taken aback.
Yeah, as you can tell, I can talk for hours, so this was always going to go quick for me. But yeah, if there's any other questions I'd love to take one before we go.
I'll go. What's next? It's the question that any writer dreads, right? But I feel like every time I interview somebody, I do always ask it because I quite like it. So what's sort of next for you on your journey?
So I find it, so I know it is the question, I get it, I get asked it a lot, but it's actually wild to me because this took so much to produce. I feel like I gave birth to this. Like, I feel like it was gestating, like it was such a labor of love, but still a labor. And now I'm just enjoying it. I'm basking in it. It's so great that it's out in the world, and I just really want to enjoy just it being here before I think about a second child. So I don't think I have a book in my near future. I think also as well, there are so many, you know, I'm having conversations like this one, which inspiring me to think about, oh, what could the next one be? And I think I want to take the time to really think about what direction I want to go in, if, you know, when I do think about book number 2 and what themes I want to cover, you know. So next for me is really just, I think, thinking about, yeah, just in life, just I want to have more of an in-person, like tangible impact. So working on projects. I already work with a lot of kind of different organizations on you know, equity and inclusion projects, and I'm looking to do more of that. and just really using my platform online. Obviously, my platform online is really great because it informs and it educates and it inspires and it drives change in its own way. And that will always be the case. But I want to use it as a tool to get more opportunities to actually, strive for tangible change in the kind of the real world. Not that the social media world is not the real world, but kind of on the ground, right? I want to do more work on the ground, community work, and try and really, work towards creating the world that I want to live in.
And on that very, very uplifting and inspiring note, I will draw this session to a close. Thank you. Yes, Benjy's book is available to borrow from any library in Essex. We have 74 of them, as well as 2 mobile ones. So you can just borrow it on the catalogue and pick it up from your local library. Benjy, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you so much. This has been such an awesome conversation, and thank you all so much for joining as well. This has been lovely, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and an awesome rest of your festival. There are so many exciting events coming up, so yeah, I hope they all go.
And before we finish, could I just say a big thanks also to Freya, and I'll leave you with a thought, Benjy. I'm I think older than anybody here this evening. I now find discrimination because of my age. I also, and this is, I mean, as a woman, all kinds of jobs, won't go into what I did, but jobs. And funnily enough, and this may not occur to a lot of people, I've been discriminated against because of the way I speak and appear to be of a certain class. And it's extraordinary. There are so many things that we have to think about when we are dealing with people, but I just throw that into the mix again with everything else. But it's been a great evening. Thank you so much. It's been a really good occasion. Thank you to Freya. Thank you for Sarah for managing it, and of course, particularly thanks to Benjy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and yes,
Thank
Freya.
everybody. Oh, no worries.
I'm going to say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.